And welcome to all our viewers to today's live stream on tech in schools. My name is Darren Orr. I'm also known as the White Hatter. It's wear a white hat. I'm just going to put it up here. And with my family, we run a company called Personal Protection Systems. We travel across Canada and the United States, sharing our message of social media safety and digital literacy to elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, college universities, and now even businesses and corporations. And today's event came about as a result of what happened last year. Last year, we ran an event. It went over very well. A couple of the panelists that you see here today were on our event last year. And it all came about because parents were connecting with me just before school starting, going, Darren, you know, all our kids has got all this tech and we don't know what to do. Can you help us? And I very quickly learned that other experts, i.e. the ones on the panel here, were getting the same questions. So I thought, why don't we come together as a group and do a live broadcast? So that's what we did last year. Went over very well, a couple of glitches, but we worked through it. And so I decided, hey, let's do the same thing this year. And so that's what today's event is all about, is based upon last year. So how the event is going to work is the panelists that you see here, I am going to be asking them specific questions to a specific panelist. I give them the opportunity to go ahead and answer the question. Then I'll open it up to the other panelists to build upon it. But we've also have the ability now to allow you to participate as well. Because remember, this is called YouTube. It's all about you, not us. So we're going to give you the ability to participate, to send us questions. And the way we're going to do that is three ways. Number one, you can send us a message via our live chat feed that's going on right now on YouTube. The second way is you can send us a tweet, and we've created a hashtag. It's hashtag BTS 2018. That's hashtag, not a pound sign, hashtag BTS 2018. And you can send us a message that way. And the third way is sending us a message on our events page on Facebook, where we have our events up. So those are the three ways that you're going to be able to provide us with questions so I can direct them at the appropriate panelist. So we're really looking forward to today. And you know what? We've brought together 4 other subject matter experts from across our country. And I'm extremely honored to have them here today. And there's a variety of different expertise. I got somebody from the hardware and software especially. I've got a PhD in the area who specializes in social media and academia. I have an educator. Yes, I have a teacher, a live teacher on the panel to help share with us her experiences in the classrooms and with kids. I also have a privacy guru, an online privacy guru who's joining us, who is also a mom, also teaches digital literacy in the classroom. And of course, there's me, right? I bring 30 years of law enforcement to the equation with my legal background and the fact that I presented over 408,000 teams from across Canada and the United States. So I can kind of bring some of their perspective to it as well. And what's really cool, we all have the same passion. We all have this passion about loving social media and digital literacy and wanting to share it with our kids and with adults and schools and everybody else who will listen. And, you know, each one of us brings our own experiential lens to the equation. We all have our different take on it. And I'm a big believer that principles stay the same, diverse in application. And we all bring the same principles, but we may apply them differently, as you will see in today's presentation. But what's even cooler is the fact that we're all Canadian, eh? Every one of us sitting on this panel are from Canada, and I love that digital flag, by the way, which I think is really, really cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask each one of our panelists to introduce themselves. And what we're going to do is we're going to start from the East Coast because it's the latest out there, and we're going to move out to the West Coast. So the first person I would like to have introduce themselves is Dr. Alissa Sklar. And I met the good old doc several years ago when I came across her site, Risk Within Reason. And I thought, I love that title, just love it. So Doc, how about a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much. What a great introduction. And I wanted to say also thank you so much for organizing this and putting this together. You are right. Parents have so many questions. And in fact, educators do as well, especially this time of year. So I really appreciate being here. A couple words about myself. I have a doctorate in communications and cultural studies, and I spent a number of years teaching at Concordia University, youth and media classes, digital literacy, some production classes, video production. And then I spent 5 years at McGill looking at adolescent high-risk issues, everything from gambling, illegal drug use, unsafe sexual practices, and bullying. And when the Quebec government brought in their anti-bullying legislation in 2012, they asked if I would be part of presenting that and that best practices to schools, to English schools. Quickly clear that you could not talk about bullying without talking about digital tech. So that kind of opened up this whole other area. And like you, I speak to schools, everything from actually daycares right up to CEGEPs and universities, talking to parents and students and educators about this emerging best practices. How do we make sense of this for our kids and for ourselves?
Thank you, Doc. You're going to bring a lot of knowledge to the panel, I'm sure, today. So the next person I want to introduce, and Doc, where are you located in Canada right now?
I am in beautiful Montreal, Quebec.
Ah, parlez-vous le français un petit? Next person is Kat Coode, and she's with Binary Tattoo. And I met Kat online several years ago, and I forget how it was. I think it was on Twitter where we met Kat. Yeah, and what I love about Kat is that she brings a common sense approach to this topic. That's what I love about Kat. Kat, maybe share who you are, what you're doing, and why you're here.
Thank you. I think you and I are the testament that people can meet online and actually be real people and not pedophiles, because you are a real person and I have met you in real life. Suspect you are who you say you are at this point. But so I'm based out of Kitchener-Waterloo. I am a computer and software engineer. I spent over a decade working at BlackBerry, which was RIM, doing architecture and software design. And after I had my 2 children, I realized that I was very fortunate to understand what they were doing online. And I realized most parents didn't. So I launched my company as Binary Tattoo. Binary for the language of all things digital, and tattoo for the permanence of everything that we're putting online. And so really the way I began was with students and parents and educators to explain how the data was being taken and used, especially with everything that's going on with Facebook privacy settings and where your data is going when you put it online, and how your reputation is managed once you do that. And I also, like Darren, have now expanded to corporate, but my first love, because I am a parent, is kids, and helping them understand and helping parents understand how to guide their children through this new world that we're living in.
Awesome, Kat. Great to have you here again. Kat was with us last year as well as the doc. New participant this year is Sandra McAulay. Sandra, I got a little story about Sandra. So here I am. I'm sitting in the Vancouver airport ready to catch a flight to I don't know who where. And then all of a sudden I hear this voice going, "It's the White Hatter!" And she was with her family and she came over to me and that kind of stuff. We started to talk. I got to know a little bit about her and what it is she does. And I found out her love for tech. And in fact, Sandra and I, we teamed together an article just recently that we post on our website about tech in the classroom. So Sandra, take it away. Introduce yourself to the audience.
Well, thank you. I actually met you probably don't remember, but years ago as a teacher at a middle school that I was teaching at in Port Alberni. And yes, and then I've always followed you, and now I'm in Smithers, BC, in the beautiful northern BC. And I sort of just fell into this passion of technology in the classroom. And I've been teaching for 20 years. I love learning and doing new things with students in my class and sharing that passion with my colleagues. So I teach grade 7, and I'm also the parent of tweens. I have one going into grade 7 and one going into grade 9. And I use technology sort of on a day-to-day basis in my classroom. And I really advocate for, kids and our schools moving forward with technology in a responsible way, and, just accepting the fact that it's part of our culture and we need to learn as fast as the kids are learning. I feel like I have, I have another part of my job right now where I'm a district resource teacher. So 2 days a week, I have the opportunity to work with all of my colleagues across the entire district, which comparatively to a big city is quite a small district, but it's lovely to have that opportunity that we can share. I can share that technology. It's kind of just part of the natural part of what's happening for me, and everything from just, using apps in the classroom to how to use it to adapt and modify for those students that need that in order to be successful.
Awesome. Great to have you on board, and I can't wait to hear some of your perspectives as an educator. Last person I'd like to introduce is Julia. Julia, I love her. I met her many years ago. She's now a part of the White Hatter team. She's joined our team, which is kind of cool. We met her several years ago at an anti-bullying conference here in British Columbia, and I heard her speaking, and I went, this woman here, she's good at what she does. So Julia, take it away. Let everybody know who you are and what you do.
Hi, I'll start out as a mom of two digitally active teens. And if you follow me on Twitter, we're having discussions right now about streaming and capturing gaming and things like that right now. I did 13 years as a K-12 teacher at School District 64 in the Gulf Islands. So around Vancouver Island here. And currently I am a professor of educational technology at Vancouver Island University's Faculty of Education, where I'm also the educational technologist. So I teach undergrads in an educational technology course. I teach graduate students a social media for educators course. I supervise master's students in the area of tech and privacy. And I also started something off the side of the desk with a couple of colleagues there called the Center for Education and Cyber Humanity. So it's looking at pro-social, really good ways we can use technology and how schools have the role in forming a society that can use technology in ways that are good for people. And I'm currently working on my PhD in the area of privacy and educational technology in public schools, specifically under BC's FIPA or FOIPA, the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, which is one of the most stringent frameworks in Canada, if not North America. And interestingly enough, our Canadian privacy commissioner, indicated that he's hoping very similar practices will be spreading across Canada. So look for much tighter, more BC-ish public privacy laws coming out. And yes, I met Darren in real life, and that was a shock really at that cyberbullying conference to meet a lot of these people in real life that I had been chatting with online. So
why is it that everybody who meets me says it was quite a shock? Like, what is that, right? So, I mean, what a great panel of experts here. And, the other thing I just noticed is, look at this, 4 women all involved in tech. How cool is that, right? Pushing this issue with all the young women who may be watching this feed right now, which I think is really cool. Again, for those who are joining, my name is Darren, and I'm known as the White Hatter, and with my family, we travel internationally presenting on the topic of social media safety and digital literacy. And we presented to just over 408,000 students right now. And I want to give a big shout out to Brandon, who's over here. He's working all that digital magic behind the scenes, and he's now teaching in elementaries, and he's doing corporate work as well. For those who are following us, several ways that you can connect with us again. So not only am I going to get to ask the questions, but so are you. So again, to connect with us online, to send us questions that you would like me to pose to the panel, you can connect with us to send us a message on the live chat feed if you're watching on YouTube. The second way is through Twitter using our hashtag BTS. It's back to school, obviously, 2018. And the last way is commenting on our events page that is on our Facebook page right now. A variety of different ways you can do that. So what I'm going to do again is I'm going to ask each person here a question specific to some topics, and then I'll direct it to that individual, and then I'll open it to the panel. So that my first question is actually going to be to the good doc, Alissa. And to start it off, I just want to show this right here. And, we get this question all the time from parents. Like, when is the right time, to get that smartphone? And, we get bugged all the time on this question. And, what is the right age for that cell phone? What kind of phone? What kind of rules should we put in place? So what do you think, Doc? What do you think?
I think that there is no magic age that's right for any particular kid. You got to know your kid. I have 3 kids. 2 of them are identical twins. They still have different rules for them because every kid is unique and different. There's a certain amount of responsibility. They're going to have to follow the rules that you establish with them. They're going to have to take care of this expensive device. They're going to have to follow the school rules and the other rules of etiquette out there in society, some of which we need to spell out for them because they're certainly not going to pick it up on their own. And then we need to think about what the cost of that, and I don't mean the actual cost of purchasing the phone and paying for their plan, but does it mean they're going to be spending less time outside? Are they going to be reading less? Are they going to be focusing less on sports or socializing or face-to-face contact? So in our house, the rule generally was that they got phones when they started using public transport to go out into the world. Before then, there was no need for these devices because I knew where they were all the time. Someone had a phone. There was, other than playing games or using Snapchat, we didn't see any reason for it. And they first got phones without data plans. Phones were primarily communication devices, very old school. just be able to keep in touch with mom or dad, let us know where they were. If they were in school or friend's house, there was Wi-Fi. And for some kids, you know, they'll say, Mom, I'm the only one in fill in the blank here, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, high school who does not have a phone. I guarantee you that is not true. The research is showing now that 1/4 of Canadian 4th graders own their own mobile device. Parents are sometimes shocked to hear that, but every time you upgrade to a new device, mom and dad, you are probably passing your old devices down to your kids, and that age is getting younger and younger over time. And there is a cost to that. Again, not a monetary cost, to the things that the kids are not doing, because this technology is so engaging and compelling, whether it's an iPad, which we're seeing babies with now having their own devices, or a phone. So to really spell out very clearly what your expectations, what your values are as a family, as parents with your kids. When is that communication important? Because it is part of the social warp and woof, I guess, of even 5th, 6th graders, certainly in high school. Doesn't mean they have to have it, but it is a big part of that socializing. And to really spell out what the expectations are, what the rules are, and what the consequences actually are for breaking the rules. And taking that device away from your 7th grader is not going to destroy their social lives. It's not going to be the end of the world. I guarantee you they will survive and even thrive without it. So do not hesitate, if those rules are broken or if you feel that it's taking over their lives, to backpedal and to take that away. Now, I know there are some parents who will give younger kids the phones because their older siblings have one, or they feel like they need it to socialize, or they need it to stay in touch with them. And I do think that's a family's individual decision, and I respect the each family's ability to make that final call. But recognize that this is very hard to come back from. Once they have these tools, you know, it's going to open up a whole new set of conversations, and yes, even battles with your kids about how much time is spent on those screens, what it's used for, what information they're giving away about themselves, how this device is tracking them all the time, because that's really what it's doing, and what that information is used for. So a lot to think about.
Yeah, you know what? I truly agree with you. You know, one of the things I say to parents is that these cell phones, they're not a right to have, they're a privilege to have. Exactly. They really are. And we parents need to start parenting on this issues, right? We need to stop being their best friends and being their best parent. Mm-hmm. The other thing, I think a good topic on the age, you know, even if the parents don't buy the kids the phone, what the kids are telling me is they're getting what they call throwaway phones from their friends, right? So although the parents may not be giving them the phones, their friends are as well. And I really like your comment on having some kind of agreement. We call it a family collective agreement. Kat, I know that you talk about that issue about a family agreement, right?
I do, yeah. I have a contract as well, and whether or not you download one, because of course you have one for free, I have one for free, or you make your own. I always, like, if you're renting a home, you make an agreement with the person you're renting from, because there has to be an agreement if something goes wrong, what the consequences to that would be. We do that with everything we do. So the same thing with cell phones. I think a lot of parents struggle. From what I've heard, when something goes wrong, they don't know what the consequence should be. So there has to be an outlined, if you breach the terms that we've agreed on, you either lose the device or you lose it after a certain hour. But we talk a lot, and I'm sure we'll touch a lot of us on monitoring and regulating kids' use. But there's, like you said, like, it can't take away from something else they're doing. And there's certain rules that should be in place. I mean, I hate to say you should put it in a contract, but no using phones while you're driving should be a written thing. Like there's certain things, maybe it's no devices at the table, maybe it's no devices in bedrooms, whatever it is. If you've agreed on that in advance and you've agreed on the consequences in advance, there's no argument when that gets breached.
Sandra, what about your perspective as a teacher? What are you seeing?
I agree with both ladies. I think that we are seeing in schools kids coming to school younger and younger with their own devices. Exactly that. They're either the parents or older siblings phoned because they've upgraded, or it's like the old iPod. I don't even think they sell iPods anymore, but it's that, and it's gaming. You know, I'm in an elementary school, so what I see at K-7 is probably not the same types of things that they're seeing in the high school. I know my husband is a principal at the high school, and that picture can be much different than what we're seeing in elementary. And as a parent, I totally agree. So our son didn't get a phone. We decided as a family there was no need until he went to high school last year. And our daughter, that's the same thing when she goes to grade 8 next year. And it's no data, and it's just, texting, and to be able to let us know where you are, because now there's these things happening after school and they ease, and kids are going to make mistakes. So I agree, like having that contract and sitting down as a family. And as far as an educator, we do in schools have to respect, the fact that these kids are coming to school with the devices, what they're doing with the devices and how they're using them in the school. We can really, we can manage that. So
and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, so I don't want to get too ahead of the game, because you're going to fit in real nicely with that one. But Julia, do you have anything to add specifically to this issue?
As a parent, even with my teens, we have a phone curfew. So the phones charge in our room. My husband and I make sure that they're turned in before bedtime, because we were finding, well, let me back it up a bit. When my kids got phones, it was part of a progression through devices and their ability to demonstrate responsible use of those. And when at a lower device, whether it was their iPod or their Nintendo, if they threw it, if they did things with it, okay, so you're frozen there for a while with, at that responsibility level, at that price point. My kids replaced a couple of iPods on their own after they had broken them, because I'd give them a buy-in level. And then, as my husband likes to say, it's nice for them to have a little skin in the game, to have some value in terms of those devices. And then they got the phone, and initially I did let them have them in the room, but then I was finding that they were online at night, and even their friends were online at night. And one evening, my son was laying beside me as we were watching something, and his phone was going off, and he felt compelled to respond. And I said to him, just don't respond. It's not the time to respond. And he had such difficulty doing that. And I said, okay, then just turn it off. Then turn off the phone. And it was such, it was like, turn off the phone. Oh my goodness, you're kidding. But now we've even gotten to the point, if there's sleepovers, and I've talked to the parents of kids who sleep over, they surrender their devices to be charged in our bedroom, and they can get them at a particular time in the morning. They're welcome to knock on the door, but no devices before a particular time. So that's a big thing with us.
Awesome.
And one other thing I just wanted to say, Darren, teacher management of devices, I don't think is taught well enough.
I agree.
And so that's one of the things, and you're going to be talking about it more. And that's something that needs to really be taught to teachers, so that they have some models of how to deal with this. Because some of them are just, they're in classrooms with these devices all of a sudden, and what do I do? They're great to use, but
yeah, and just a couple of things from my perspective. The phones or any technology in a classroom, is affecting sleep issues, right? And we're seeing an increase in kids coming to school tired. And when kids are tired, learning is halted. And the other thing I can share with you as a police officer, when I got involved because something bad happened on social media, it usually looked like this: teen in their bedroom at night with a device, unsupervised internet access, almost every single time. And the kids will say, "But Mom, Dad, it's my alarm clock. It's my alarm clock."
I bought mine an alarm clock. That's what I did.
Right? Like, are they going to be mad at you? Yeah, but oh well, that's what makes us parents, right? And we parents need to parent sometimes. So great discussion. Next question is going to be, I'm going to shoot at Kat. And Kat, I'm just going to show you this little thing. I think you'll recognize it, about what happened over the Chromebook issues. And I think in your area where you're living, because we know a lot of schools right now are allowing kids to have Chromebooks or iPads and allowing to take the technology home with them. And there's some issues there that we need to talk about. And I know that you really hold to your heart. So go ahead.
Okay, so the technology is being introduced in schools, and as we've kind of said, some of the educators are being provided with a lot of information about it and some are not. Parents are welcome to ask questions. So number one, before we say anything else, if your child is coming home with technology from school and you have questions about it, contact the school. So you have every right to ask about what's on those devices, how they're using them. I get a lot of questions about the email addresses that children are assigned. Google does a lot of tracking. We see that a lot, but the Google email addresses that are being assigned to students are not connected in the same way as a Gmail address or a YouTube account are connected. So they are not being tracked by their identity the way that they would be with a regular Google address. So that said, these Chromebooks that some of the schools have started to distribute have access to the internet. And most schools will have it so that the firewall or whatever filtering they have on those devices are set at the school level. So they're set not on the device itself, but at the actual school. So if a child walks off school campus with that device and walks into a Tim Hortons or a Starbucks and logs onto their Wi-Fi, they very well could access anything using that piece of hardware. There are some filtering softwares available that do go directly on the device, but again, I don't know, Darren, if you've seen it, in our region, it's not. It's at the school level. They do sometimes filter different things for different kids. I went into my own school and asked to see what filtering we were using, and I know they've since changed it. We had YouTube was open, and there were certain things they were looking for. So they were blocking the words breast, so you couldn't look up breast cancer, but you also couldn't look up pornography. So you get those kind of things where they couldn't look up Planned Parenthood to do a project on it, but they also couldn't look up Planned Parenthood. But with YouTube, you'll get YouTube videos that are not necessarily appropriate for kids to be watching, but they won't be filtered by any of the typical filters. So again, important, if your child is being handed a piece of hardware that is owned by the school, again, every right to ask questions about how that's being filtered and what you should do at home about it. And in most cases, as we found, you can't actually download your own software onto those devices, so you can't add additional filtering products to it.
And obviously the schools don't want that to happen because they're afraid that now people are going to download bad things in the computers.
Bad things, right.
I was at several school districts down in Washington State that are giving out Chromebooks now. And here's what they've done, which I think is really smart. They've had their IT section, their main boss, identify 3 separate products that are compliant with using Chromebooks. And so what they say to the parents is, hey, listen, if you want to download these things onto the Chromebook at home, because you as the parent have the right, we're going to do it at school. But if you want, then what we're going to ask you to do is these are the 3 products, but you know what? We're buying the computers. You're going to have to pay for it to be downloaded onto the Chromebook themselves. And it's worked quite well that way. Anybody else on the panel?
I just wanted to actually say something to remember that anytime you hand a child or anyone a device like that, it is theoretically a portal into anything out there. And although these controls and these filters are useful and they're important and we need to put them on there, there's no substitute for supervision and guidance. And that even the best filter out there is sometimes going to make mistakes. I remember my youngest, when she was 4 years old, typed Elmo into the search engine on YouTube. I didn't even know she knew how to type. And she ended up with this awful video that someone had made in which Dora the Explorer shoots Elmo. And she had nightmares for months. And there was no filter in the world that actually would have caught something like that. So sometimes those filters are important, but they're not the same as having a parent or an adult aware of what's happening on those screens.
Yeah, you know what? It's to me, it's all about parental participation, communication, and parental overwatch, right? Where reasonable and appropriate to do so. Until your kids can prove to you they're being good digital citizens, and then we can give them a little bit more latitude and stuff.
Exactly. They get to earn, like you said before, this is a privilege. Yeah. Freedom. One of my parenting guidelines is freedom is a privilege that you earn with consistent, responsible behavior. Like it's common sense for any kind of parenting. You want to go to the park alone with your friends? I need to know you're going to cross the street safely, come home on time, not, all those things. So the freedom to have those screens is something that you have to earn over time with consistent behavior.
I think as a tool, though, too, when a school hands this over, there have to be those clear guidelines, and the consequences have to be spelled out. Because as you know, Alissa, like when you look at any of the court cases, mostly in the United States, that have been brought against schools in cases of cyberbullying, almost always there was no clear, explicit policy language around the use of digital technology. In this case, how that Chromebook is being used and what the consequences will be. And then quite often the consequences were totally inappropriate to the activity that occurred. You had honor students getting busted down to life skills classes, and then that causes another lawsuit. The other thing I think is really important to remember, and this goes for teachers too, is that when a school district gives you a piece of technology, you have to remember that everything you do on that can be monitored by the school district. And there was a high profile case, I think it was in the States, of where the IT department was actually accessing a kid's laptop at home and looking at what they were doing during their off hours, and it became a huge deal. And I don't remember where it went.
We've had a case here in BC too, Julia, where the same thing, where you know, the district got into a computer. It was actually a school district computer owned by a teacher, and there were some consequences for sure, right? And again, this is why clear policy and procedure needs to be set out. And one of the things I find with a lot of schools that I visit is they're giving out this tech, but they have no policy, they have no procedure, and they have no training either on this topic. So next question, I'm going to shoot this one at Sandra. And Sandra, just shooting and have a look. You know, one of the things I'm finding, if you have a look at this, is we're finding that a lot of schools right now, or even provinces, here's a good example where France is now banning any kind of technology. And more importantly, here in Canada, we had, if you see here, where Kat's from, Ontario, where the government is looking to ban technology in the classroom right now. So I'm just wondering, you know, as a teacher who's working in the classroom right now, what do you think? How do you think teachers and school personnel can successfully manage devices in the classroom?
Well, I definitely, you know, I agree with Julia. There definitely, teachers need just more. It's, you know, the technology is changing so fast, and what the kids are bringing to school and their knowledge. I think a lot of teachers feel a bit overwhelmed and like they don't have the experience or the training in that. So I think there's a number of things. I think number one, I think for sure policy is really important, and I feel like everybody needs to be on board, from the parents, the school district, the administrators, you know, and the teachers. I feel like it has been really successful in my experience with students in the classroom that bring their own devices. So I can speak of my own experience with grade 7s. They're going to come to school next week, and my expectation, it's, you know, definitely changed in the last few years, because that's probably the first thing that we talk about when they walk in the door. So I greet them, you know, I'm so excited to see you. This is going to be an awesome year. Okay, let's talk about devices. So A, I recognize that not everybody has one. B, you do not need to bring it to school. C, I know that you probably, if you do have one, you might be allowed to bring it to school. So this is how we're going to start off the year. So my guidelines are, you are welcome to have it in the classroom. And if you actually have it, I actually want it out, and I would like it turned over and sitting on your desk. I don't want it in your hoodie pocket. I don't want it in your backpack, because then I'm going to have to manage. Well, I don't really, but I make that very clear. You know, if something happens to it, that's your responsibility. So I'm not the police for lost or stolen devices. But I also don't want it in your hoodie and then you're going to the bathroom so that you can Snapchat your friends, right? So it's out in the open, and you can, if you don't feel like you can responsibly and respectfully manage that, then I have this little bin that's right at the front. It's just open, and it's sitting at the front of my classroom, and you're welcome to put it in there and just talk to me. So just say to me, you know, my mom needed to text me because I wasn't sure if I was supposed to go to band after school or pick up my little sister. And I'll say, sure, like, grab your phone. I'm not going to follow you over your shoulder, but just do it right here in the classroom with me. Because reality is, I use my phone in the classroom at recess and at lunch if I need to. I have my own family that I check in with. I actually use it to do stuff with the class. And so then there's consequences, right? So the kids know kind of the boundaries. And I think it's about, especially with the age group that I teach, it's about teaching them that they can be responsible with it, that they are going to make mistakes, and that's okay. And I'm not going to, you know, depending on what happens, the hammer is not going to be laid so that it's ridiculous consequence, but that it's reasonable. We ask at our school that there's no devices outside once they get to school grounds. So they're not allowed to have their phone out before school, at recess, and at lunch, because we want them to interact and be social and be active. And so that is a policy for the whole school, and all of our staff are totally on board with that. And I would say it's kind of like that.
And so that's my question, Sandra, is you've got some really cool things going on. Are all the other teachers on board? Because one of the things I find is when I go to the schools, some teachers will be on board, most won't. And because not everybody's on the same wavelength, it creates this situation that is totally unmanageable.
Yeah, so I feel like that is true. I think you know, we do have to respect teachers' autonomy. I feel like we probably would make some progress with that, and I respect where those teachers are coming from, especially our secondary teachers, where, you know, they've got the kids, you know, there's some kind of crazy quote about, you know, I know if you think I'm not going to say it right, but something about, you know, the kids, and they've got their phone and they're like down looking at their crotch. Like, we know what you're doing. So in a high school, it's probably much more difficult to manage, but I've seen it done successfully. I've seen it with the bin at the front, like, please just drop it in the bin. This is what we're doing today. And I've seen it where, you know, you have your phone, take it out. We're going to take pictures of this lab. I want you to take pictures of the lab. And if you don't have a phone, look, I've got 5 school iPads over here. We can use those as well. So teaching the kids, you know, I was in a grade 12 class and we were talking about accessibility. There were some students who had some learning difficulties and they really needed to be able to hear what they were reading as well as read it. And it was amazing. We sometimes think these kids know all of this technology. None of them knew about the accessibility on iPads and the 2-finger swipe and hit play, and that an article could be read to them, or even reader view. They hadn't heard of AirDrop, or you know, the fact that they could take a picture, edit it, and they could put their own text into it and AirDrop it to their teacher as a way to hand in their assignment. So I think with more education for teachers, the opportunity for that professional development and discussions like this, and seeing where it can be managed in a positive way. Of course, there's always going to be hiccups. I feel like we can do it. I feel like, you know, and we have to have parent support. That can be tricky.
Yeah. You know what? We could talk about that topic for hours, and I think that might just be another one that we're going to do later on. So, but my next question is going to be for Julia. Julia, I'm going to flash this one up here. I read this online just the other day about what's going on in Australia. I don't know if you saw that, where parents are up in arms right now over schools that are downloading information into school district computers and stuff. And why that really interests me is because of a tweet you put out yesterday that I thought was awesome. You said, already heard from BC Ed parents concerned about wholesale preloading of students' personal information in online platforms from schools, students' information systems before consent is obtained. You know, I'm a privacy hawk, much like you. Help the audience understand this.
Okay, I think, and this part of this was my journey. You know, I started using technology, then I became aware of how FIPPA, the Freedom of Information Protection of Privacy Act, related to public schools and what was actually considered personal information. There's a real misunderstanding from teachers in terms of BC and what BC considers personal information. Gender, if you're still using gender is considered a personal piece of information in and of itself. There's a list of things. Voice now is considered personally identifiable information. Of course, a picture, a video. And so there's a misunderstanding of that. But then as I started looking at it, I think our problem starts with not understanding that privacy is a right. It's a fundamental human right. It's recognized in the Convention of the Rights of the Children. It's recognized in the UN Charter of Human Rights, the human rights. And it's recognized in like 172. I did a research on some constitutional databases. It's explicitly mentioned in like 172. In ours, interestingly enough, the word privacy never appears, but it's covered under 2 sections, and then a bunch of case law is what frames up privacy. But it's not understanding that that's a right. I have that right. My kid has that right. Your kid has that right. And if you want to impose upon that privacy, if you want to make some of that information accessible, especially in BC, if you're making that accessible, transferring it, storing it outside of Canada and beyond charter protection, there are specific steps that you must take. So there's not an awareness of that as a fundamental right. There's not an awareness of, okay, what is personal information in BC in particular? It's a bit different across the provinces, but you guys are coming up towards us. And then there's the other thing of what are my obligations? And I still have, colleagues who say to me, oh, if it takes a consent form, I don't want to do it, right? If I have to research the privacy policy, I don't want to do it. And I think privacy policies are not written so people can understand them well. We know that. But we can give people the tools to look for flags in privacy policies and things.
But why is this so important? Like, why as a parent should I care about this, right? Like, who cares, right?
There's a great thing called surveillance capitalism, and Zuboff out of, I think it's Harvard. She's at Harvard. She talks about this, and our data is basically the gold mine for today's companies, and the behavioral profiling, so they could even market things to us. Facebook bought some facial recognition software, and then they were actually they did some testing where they put people's faces in the ads of people consuming a product, and then found if they showed that ad to the person, they then were more interested in buying the product because they're already seeing themselves literally using and consuming this product. So I really think that if we do not educate our kids and our public, we are basically being strip mined of our data and strip mined of our behavioral profiling and sold goods.
And that's the issue, right? Like, our personal information is the currency of
absolutely
big pharma, big business,
absolutely.
Right? And they're making lots and lots of money. But the struggle we find, I think, with some teachers, and again, I bow to the teacher, is that some of these apps that you can use are really, really cool and they're free, but we're not thinking about some of the privacy issues associated with that.
But some of my students, which has been great, there's a student that I had, his name is Felipe. Anyway, he came to me and he figured out a way to use Duolingo's education without ever needing the app on an iPad, without ever needing a piece of personal information. He came to me because in one of my courses, he has to create a consent form. And he said, Julia, I don't think I need a consent form. I think I figured out a way to use this tool without exposing any personal data. And I looked at it, I'm like, I think you have too. I will contact my friends at OIPC, the Office of the Information Privacy Commission. They go, oh, yeah, he has. And I don't think that we actually take the time as teachers or tech or an admin to say, do I need to provide this information to use this tool, or can I use it without sacrificing that information?
Next question, moving along here. Thanks. Doc, this one's for you. This is a great one. We're seeing this all over. This is the big thing now, right? How people are talking about screen time and how it's affecting our kids' mental health, emotional, and stuff. So what's the research? What's the research telling? You're the PhD. What's it telling us?
Well, it's actually pretty alarming. I have to say I haven't done any independent research on my own of this, but what I've seen from the secondary research is it's very, very worrisome and very shocking. And some of the most interesting research right now is coming from a Dr. Jean Twenge out of the US, who took years and years of this very massive survey data that was being done with middle school and high school students in the US on everything about their lives. And she found this incredible sea change in mental health, actually in many different things, starting in 2012. And 2012 is an interesting year because it's the year in which smartphone ownership among high school students and middle school students surpassed 50% in the US. And so she would see things like at that moment, from 2012, a 12 to 17% drop in the amount of sleep our kids are getting. She saw an alarming rise in the diagnosis of anxiety, depression, self-harm, suicide ideation, attempted suicides, completed suicides, all this emotional mood regulation. And it does seem, although she tried to control for all these other factors, economic, all these other things that were happening in the world, the only thing that continued to remain a significant factor is the amount of smartphone use specifically. There's no question we have a mental health crisis among this generation, and I'm talking actually about kids from primary school through middle school and high school, and certainly into university as well. It's always very hard to imply causation from correlation, so I don't want to jump and do that. But the data that we're starting to see, as opposed to just the anecdotal evidence that we were hearing before, is that there seems to be a very complex connection between use of these devices and a lot of this mental health issues. And it seems that time spent on device is the salient factor here.
So I'm going to push back just a little bit because I like doing that. Are you familiar with Dr. Patrick Markey? He's a professor of psychology and the director of the IR laboratory at Villanova University.
Nope.
I'm familiar with the research that you've just shared with me, but there's a lot of other research right now that's really attacking her research right now to say maybe it's not as good as what people are saying. And one of the things I've been reading is that really it's not the amount of time that they're doing online, it's what they're doing with their time online. So a good example, are they just being consumers and using what they're doing online as bubblegum for the brain? Or are they becoming these creators where they're creating things and doing things and and again, it's all about that balance, right?
I agree with you. Actually, I've always made a distinction between passive versus active consumption or time spent on screen. So if you're playing Minecraft and using this incredible sandbox, open-ended tool to build these worlds, it's not the same as watching videos of other people playing Minecraft, which is, as an adult, impossible to understand.
Or Fortnite. Kat, what do you think?
Oh my God, that was the worst floss ever.
Oh, come on.
Let's see his orange justice.
Yeah, I can do a good orange justice. Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I mean, you and I have talked about this a lot. To me, we've lost resilience with the on-demand nature of being online. So, I mean, I always joke, like, yes, we watched a lot of TV as kids, but we watched what we watched when it was on. If you were not home at 8 o'clock on a Thursday for the Cosby Show, you didn't see the Cosby Show. Nowadays, kids are like, I want to watch this show. I'm going to watch it for 5 minutes. I changed my mind. I don't like it. I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to put something new on. I don't like that. I'm going to turn that off. They get what they want when they want it all the time. And the YouTube, and like, again, you can watch an entire series on Netflix. We never had that. You had to wait a whole week for the next episode. So what I'm seeing with my kids in elementary school and the kids I speak with is, again, they've lost resiliency. They can't be uncomfortable in their own skin. Kids need opportunities to have to sit at a table and wait for food to come without a device. And they need to be able to wait for an airplane without a device. And so if we're constantly like placating them with electronics, they have no time to develop that. I'm uncomfortable in this situation. I'm going to find a way to deal with it.
And and we've spoken about this. This really comes down to parenting when you think about it, right? Because it's the parents that are giving them these digital keys to the digital highway, right? And then the kids are going to school, getting in trouble, and then they're looking at the principals and teachers going, "Hey, you deal with this. This is your problem now," right? Like, and this sense of entitlement that we're giving the kids to these devices, I think, is what's causing some of these issues. So. There's my next question.
There's a great book that every school kid should read. It's called The Feed by M.T. Anderson. And it's what the world looks like when the internet is actually implanted in your brain and marketing you stuff. And then it's an awesome book. It was written over 15 years ago, and it's marking the trajectory where we're headed if we don't.
Awesome. My wife would argue with you. It's already in me. So, Kat, this one's for you. Kat. This next one. These online challenges that we see the kids getting involved in, right? The fire challenge. I'm sure you saw that another young girl just last week ended up, a 12-year-old, third-degree burns most of her body. The cinnamon challenge, the choking challenge, the Kiki challenge, the Tide Pod challenge. Like, you look at these things on YouTube and they look really funny, but why should these be important for parents to know? Why?
Well, a lot of them, I mean, the Tide Pod one, again, I'm still shaking my head at that one. I don't know why you would want to ingest a Tide Pod. But part of the problem with the Tide Pod challenge, if people didn't see it, I mean, they look yummy to eat, I guess. People were eating them and then filming them. And then hours to days later, they would end up with problems in their throat because it was acidic and it had eaten away at their throat. You don't see that in the video. So you get a lot of these YouTube challenges where people are like, let's do this crazy thing. And they film it and they put it on YouTube, and the destruction of the challenge doesn't come until much later. So especially young kids are really susceptible. They want to fit in. Yeah, they want to do what everyone else is doing. So it's important that parents, like, we would talk about monitoring, and if your kid is old enough to be alone and to regulate and to understand that what they're watching isn't something they should emulate, then great, then they can be on YouTube. But these YouTube challenges are really easy to find. The cinnamon one caused a lot of problems for kids.
There were a couple of teens that ended up in comas as a result of that, because when you suck it, you get that gag reflex. You suck that cinnamon into your lungs, right?
But you don't see that on the videos, right? That's the problem. So for every kid who's actually injured doing one of these things, you've got 25 videos on YouTube where they're not injured. So it's important from a monitoring perspective. And a filter is not going to filter a bunch of other children eating cinnamon.
Yeah. And that's why I think it's so important that parents actually get online, do their own research about these challenges and educate. I mean, I do that in my presentation where I talk about every one of these challenges. And although they look funny, some of the dangers to them for sure. Sandra, this one's going to be for you. You know, how did teachers get more involved in digital literacy and safety? Is it just training, or is it something else? Like, how do we get the teachers more involved?
Yeah, I think it does come down to professional development. I think, you know, I feel like it's, you know, there's so many changes that we've had, especially in BC as of late with our education system. And there's been, you know, a whole wave of sort of new curriculum. And so there's a lot of pressure on teachers. There's a lot of pressure on teachers, and teaching really has changed. And, you know, I still feel really young in my career, but, you know, really it is 20 years that I've been teaching. And, you know, society, you know, we say these things all the time. Society's changed, parents have changed, kids have changed. So I feel like it is part of our job as teachers to seek that out and to have that, those opportunities given to us for that training. I think it is. And I think, you know, places like this where we can start to chat about it. You know, teachers are really collegial. So we really, you know, the staff room, the hallways, like people are always collaborating. And I think for educators to have that opportunity to chat and to have that time in their week where they can learn that and have some places or you know, just even those little hallway conversations where they can ask those questions of people who you know, are seeking that out and maybe know a little bit more or have started to do. I mean, I certainly didn't feel like I was super techie. And then about, you know, 6 years ago, I applied for an innovation grant and I got half a class set of iPads with grade 4s and kind of just plowed myself into it. So I think, you know, it's doable. I always feel like if it's someone like me who, you know, I sat there at computer camp and had to quit because I didn't understand this, you know, orange and black screen with the DOS and blah, blah, blah as a kid in grade 7 to now being sort of a leader of technology in my district. Like, I feel like anyone can do it.
Yeah, if I can do it, anybody can do it. You know, I was at a really progressive school where the teachers once a week had the kids come in to teach them.
Yeah.
I mean, how cool is that, right? Like, you know, because I think, you know, sometimes we adults, we're afraid to say, listen, we don't know. Do you want to tell us?
Yes.
Right? But, you know, the kids have the experience, but we have the world knowledge, right? We have, you know, we have age and we have all that learning. They may have the tech knowledge. So why not use the kids as well? A couple of questions that came in.
Darren, just before we jump out of that topic, I think administration has a key role to play. This isn't something that should be done off the side of a teacher's desk informally. There should be formal learning opportunities, resourcing, time, release time, that administration have to show that this is important to them as well. Yeah. So sorry, I just couldn't let that go. Yeah.
Good point. A couple questions that came in to us. How long have you been the White Hatter? Long time, couple of years. Here's a really good one for Kat. Kat, this is a good question. Can you recommend some apps that can set timers to shut the internet off after a certain amount of time?
Oh, there's a whole bunch. I think you may have a better list than I do. But okay, so in terms of there's monitoring and then there's managing. So I always kind of differentiate the two. So that's a really great question because managing turns things off where monitoring allows you to watch. And people often mix the two up. Most browsers and pieces of hardware come with their own management software. So if you are talking about an iPad, the iPad already has a lot of parental stuff built into it. And there's lots of things that you may already have running like Norton Antivirus that will have management software in it. Certainly NetSanity does management. So a lot of the monitoring software will include management, but again, a lot of the default software that if you just look on your operating system, on your computer, on your tablet, will have management software on it as well.
Yeah, you know what? I recommend, and I get no kickback from these companies, but if they're using an iPad, iPhone, I use NetSanity, and then I partner it with Bark. I mean, I love the Bark app, right? If they're using an Android phone, I have them use what's called Boomerang, which is a Vancouver-based company, and team it with Bark. And combine that with parental supervision, right? Because remember, tech doesn't work all the time. And I find too many too many parents are looking for that snake oil, that thing that's going to work 100% of the time. That's digital and it doesn't. The best thing that works is parental participation, communication, and oversight, right?
And then unplugging the router. I have done that upon occasion.
But you just hope your next door neighbor doesn't have an open Wi-Fi, right? That the kids are
That's true.
Or your city, like ours, has an open Wi-Fi that you can get anywhere, right? So those are some of the issues that we're going to look at. Julia, next question for you. You know what? I know you're a parent of a young teen. So as a parent and as an educator who's working on her PhD, how are you implementing digital literacy into your home? And part two, the second part of that question is, I know that you allow your kids to take the lead on teaching you things as a parent specific to the digital world. Why is this important as a parent to allow the kids to teach you?
So let me start with the first question. In terms of how I work with my kids, one of the things, I think it was Kat who was talking about watching television and those things and coming home. There was a real push for media literacy, media literacy and making us critical consumers of what we see or what we put out. And so with my kids, I'm very conscious of that. When they see things like these challenges, I'm like, we talk about that. And I said, is this a good thing to do? And they're like, no. I said, is it an IQ test? Is it Darwin's theory in work? So we're looking at things like that. And then when they're using things like right now, my sons are starting to stream their gaming. And they told me, we've set the settings, people don't know who we are, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, okay, but you're capturing other people while you're doing this. You have your team that's also playing. Do they know that you're streaming? And then we get into conversations about, oh, so-and-so's mom knows that he streams. I'm like, do you really think that's adequate permission, right? So we're starting to get into these discussions. In terms of taking the lead, like my sons are tutoring me in two of the softwares that I'm going to be demonstrating to my ed tech students. GIMP.
Bring them into your class. Bring them into your class.
GIMP and Shotcut. And they've been, because they're open source. And even my son said to me, he goes, why am I learning Adobe products in school? I can't afford Adobe products. We're not putting them in here. He said, is there open source stuff that we can use? So it's important to me because they feel empowered and they feel that they have something to share with me. It's not always good. Most of the times it is. And I think it creates a nice balance where there's a give and take. They can learn some stuff from me. I can learn some stuff from them. And then we kind of ratchet up, through the family and the whole family learns. We're a little learning community in that sense.
So what I just heard from you is it's what I say. It's a three-legged stool: parental participation, communication, combined with parental overwatch where required.
Absolutely.
You put those three things in together and get your kids involved. The other thing I share with parents is have a digital dinner with your kids once a week. That doesn't mean bring their phones to the table, because you should never bring tech to the table, right? Because all the research out there shows that dinner is the best time to bond, right? But what it does mean every night at the dinner table, every Wednesday night, you talk about everything digital, right? Because trust me, kids will talk about digital for 30 minutes at dinner rather than what they're going to do at grandma's house on the weekend, right? So give them that opportunity, learn from them. But you know what the kids tell me though, when they're trying to teach their parents? I try to teach my mom or my dad. They have no patience. They have no patience. Right? And it's true, because us adults, here's how we learn: A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Here's how kids teach: A, B, Q, M, Z, W, X, right? And it drives us crazy. So one of the things I can share with parents is if you just give your kids a little bit of patience, you'll be amazed at what it is that you'll learn. You really will.
The only thing they gave up on me, they were trying to teach me how to play a first-person shooter game using the Xbox, and they lost patience with me in terms of the training, like how long it was taking me to go through training. And then actually the younger son said to the older son, you need to be more patient. You're not a good teacher. And I'm like, oh, I'm sitting here as the poor student. So
which segues really nice into my next. By the way, we're going to go a little bit over. You guys okay with that?
Sure.
You guys okay?
Yeah. Can I just add something really quickly? Julia keeps talking about streaming. I just know for a lot of parents, streaming to them means downloading to them. When Julia says streaming, she's talking about live feeding out. So there are numerous new applications that our kids are using to stream either their own cameras, which is why we all talk about keeping devices out of bedrooms, but either their own cameras, or in this case, gaming. When you live play Fortnite, you can stream it back out for other people to watch you play live. And then
great segue, Kat. For the doc, my kid is glued to Fortnite, and it's causing a lot of tensions and problems into the house. How do I need to know about this game, and how do I help them find a healthy balance between the time they're spending in the game, playing, here we go. Let's hear it. I know, shake your head. I know I'm bad, but hey, I give it a shot.
I hear this is like become literally, and pun totally intended here, like a battleground for a lot of parents. Partly, I think for a lot of parents, their idea of like, it's dinner time, or you need to be doing your homework, or they walk in and they're like, can't believe their kids are still playing this game, is that these are not games where you give them a 5-minute warning and you can turn them off. These are highly social games where abandoning the game because dinner is being served right now means you're letting everyone else down, and you're also now being left out. You're self-excluding from the social place, this thing that's happening. So and some of these games can go on for a very long time. So each time they start a game, you're looking at, it'd be like 45 minutes before your kid is now ready to go. So parents have to partly like understanding from their kids what's involved. Is they're going to be allowing them to use this tool to understand actually what's involved in playing a game. And a 5-minute warning is not going to cut it. So you have to start talking about the units of the games, what's acceptable, when, what should they, I always talk about the cost, like what are you not doing when you're on these things? So if your kid is getting some, physical play, face-to-face social time, doing their chores, walking the dog, spending time at dinner, and then after ticking off all those really important things in life, if they do have free time and they choose to spend it on a Fortnite, and that's okay with you, you got to step back and let them do it at an appropriate time. So some of that is kind of a communication and understanding piece between the things.
And when it comes to gaming, it's all about finding that balance again, right? But a lot of parents don't know this. There were over 40 universities in the United States last year that offered full 4-year gaming scholarships.
Oh yeah.
Here in Vancouver, huge. I mean, they've built it. It's the first in Canada gaming place where kids can come. It is unbelievable. But with that comes the new thing that is called gaming disorder that is being recognized. So one of the things I say to parents is if your kid is gaming, finding a balance, but if it's affecting them negatively, emotionally, psychologically, physically, or social way, then it's not really good for them, right? And they need to find that balance.
We get asked about addiction all the time, and I actually worked in the International Center for Youth Gambling Problems and High-Risk Issues. So, internet addiction, even though it's not in the new issue of the DSM, is nevertheless, if it's affecting your daily life, if it's negatively impacting your ability to work, spend time with people, do school, complete your chores, and keep your body healthy, then it's a problem, whether we talk about addiction or not. And here in Montreal, we have centers that treat youth for internet and gaming addictions, and it really can have a very detrimental impact on people's lives.
There's an upside too to gaming. I listen to my kids playing Fortnite, and I hear teamwork and collaboration. I hear my kid taking lead on, raids and things like that. And then they're teaching each other how to do things. They're learning how to do things. Like I watch my kids, watching a YouTube video while they're playing about how to do something, and I'm like, oh my goodness, right? They're processing this information. And in my case, and one other thing I just wanted to say, Darren, my older nephew is actually working for EA Games on NBA 2019. So this has become a job path for my kids, and they can see somebody who went through master's degree and has a job designing now and looking at that.
I was just down in Nashville at a presentation I was a keynote at an educators conference down there, and they estimate by 2023 there will be 3.5 million openings for coders in North America.
Oh wow.
Just unbelievable. And so what they were talking about is that if kids can code Java, Python, and some of the other languages out there, they're kind of setting themselves up for some financial success down the road. Kat, another quick question here. Sharenting. Why should parents be concerned about this thing called sharenting?
Parenting. Well, identity theft is actually a really big thing for children, which people don't realize that if you overshare your child's information, you can actually be, and Julia will speak to this, I'm sure, from a privacy perspective with data. But more so, we are defining our children's digital identity for them, and that's not fair. So my daughter, who's 8 now, since she was 4, has never liked her picture taken. And the number of my friends who would just take her picture and put it on Facebook without asking made me really realize, because they put their own children out there, doesn't necessarily mean other kids. Just because they're kids doesn't mean they don't have a say. And all these embarrassing things, I know everyone loves, who's the Halloween candy? Is that Jimmy Kimmel who does the parents who embarrass the kids?
Yeah.
Right? And I'm like, everyone else loves it except for me, because I look at it as a bunch of kids who are going to grow up and then their friends are going to make fun of them because they were bratty in a video, or they're never going to live it down and they'll be called like candy brat for the rest of their high school career because they cried in a video over Halloween candy. It's just, there's things in our children's lives that is not for us to share. So at the very least, because in Ontario, we start school next week, and my Facebook will be flooded with here is my kid with their little placard that has their name and their school and their grade and their favorite stuff. Just make sure your children want that shared. I mean, ask them, but also from an identity theft perspective, that you're not oversharing their name and their age and all this information, especially publicly. Like it's just make sure your privacy settings are set at the very least on that.
Just to give you a really good example of a sharing I got involved in, where parents, we know they're sharing pictures of the kids in vitro, right? Ultrasounds and putting on. I met a young man who was being targeted in grade 7 at a school I was teaching at for digital peer aggression. I don't call it cyberbullying, I call it what it is, it's violence. But and what happened was his aggressor Googled his name, and he actually found a picture that his mom put online when he was 2 years old, that she put into Facebook, that she hashtagged with his name, where he was naked in the bathtub with his little penis out, that she thought was cute and she would share with her family. But as we know, everything's public, permanent, searchable, exploitable, copyable, and for sale. I know you like that one, Kat. I could not say that. And so they actually took that picture and they used that as a weapon against the child. And so these are things that parents, it may be cute now, but what about when kids get a little older, right? How could that picture potentially be used as a weapon?
And then you have parents who are actually griping about their kids online. Yes. And it's just, what does that say about the kid? What is that, what is it going to mean when other people read it? We really have to be careful about those things, and especially kids in care tend to be more victims of identity theft quite a bit. So
last question goes to Sandra.
I just got a one question. If we are modeling for our kids, also asking their consent, modeling consent, are you okay with me putting this on online? Then we can expect them to demand the same and to do that with their friends. So when they get that device for the first time, my rule with the kids is you don't post pictures of anyone else without their permission, and you expect the same courtesy extended to you, because that's what we do in the house as well.
Sure.
And I taught my kids when they were younger, if they were they wanted a picture of a younger kid, they had to ask the parents' permission as well. So that was, they've gotten a little older out of that now, but they realize that they need people's permission for things.
Last question goes to Sandra, the teacher. Why are school policies specific to digital and social media use so important? Why is it so important that schools really start to get a handle on this, and rather than just paying it lip service, do more?
Well, I think that, number one, I think it's just to keep, our kids safe. That's the number one thing. I think we want school to be a safe place where kids are, and it gets really muddy between home and school. That line gets muddy very easily.
Mm-hmm.
I do feel, in BC, like Julia said, we have some really, I guess the word would be strict, Julia.
Like you strict, yeah.
Yeah, really strict stuff with FOIPA that makes it really, I feel like as an educator, really easy to just implement that policy. And, little things like Google Classroom, like I can't use that. We don't use that because all of the data is stored south of the border, right? So when we were looking for, ways where teachers can introduce technology into the classrooms and with policy, we were fortunate enough that every teacher was given like a teacher iPad. That was a device that then we are not using our personal devices like our own phones as a teacher, which is, you don't think about it and you think, oh, I'm gonna take this photo of this and, this is great and I can show the kids on the screen later and I will delete it and I'll be really careful, but it's still sitting there on your own personal device. I think policy is also really important because then everybody is in the same boat. We all know wherever, it's really easy to just follow. We all know the sort of, the where we all sit, the consequences, and we all are in agreement, which just makes everything a little bit more slick. It makes it slick for dealing with kids who are like, you can't take my phone, you can't, touch my phone, to parents who are coming in, saying this cyberbullying was happening to my daughter last night. Like, what are you going to do about it? Well, it makes it really easy when you have, really clear policy as a district. And, when Julia said earlier about the professional development for teachers, she's bang on. Yeah. And, luckily enough here in Smithers, and from my experience teaching in a few other districts across the province, we are doing, I feel like we're doing really well. We do support our teachers in that way. And I think, that the conversation has to keep going because the technology keeps developing. So you can't set a policy like 3 years ago. You need to come back and look at it. And you need to look at it as a district. You need to look at it as a school. And then you need to look at how you're going to implement that in your classroom, because what I'm doing in grade 7 is going to look very different than what the grade 4 teacher is doing. And of course, the grade 1 teacher is probably not dealing with that at all, unless somebody brings, a device for show and tell. And then they kind of have to think, oh, right, like, what am I doing with this? Or when that grade 1 teacher is out on supervision and she sees my grade 7s with the device out and they're not supposed to be at recess, right? So, and it, just comes back to safety. It comes back to safety for our students, safety for our staff.
And it also comes to parent buy-in too, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, that's huge, right?
I just need to clarify a point of law in terms of FIPA. So you can store personal identifiable data outside of Canada. It can be accessible, it can be all these things, but there needs to be consent obtained in a very particular way that explains the risks. And some districts have decided because of the risks, they don't consider the educational benefit enough with those particular tools and have gone a different route. But any tool can be FIPA compliant. It's how we're using it that makes it FIPA compliant. And
thank you for clarifying that. Yes, you're right.
And for all the teachers and administrators, every one of these panelists you see here, we have the ability to come in and help educate educators and administrators on all these topics. So
I just wanted to actually, there's one thing I just want to
sure.
We did with a school here in Montreal that is just, I think, really a model for how well this can work, especially at the high school level, but I think it could be adapted for middle schools and elementary schools, was they took the policy for the school. This is for a girls' school in Montreal called Trafalgar School for Girls. And they gave it to the students to write in language that they understand. The students wrote it out in now they got it. This is not the legalese. Nobody reads these policies, let's be honest. Then they consulted the teachers, so they got some input. Then they went to the parents. And every new class of 7th graders, which is the age at which we start high school in Montreal, gets to go back and look at that policy again and revise it. So when they're in the classroom, when they're doing stuff, this is something they own and they bought, and it's in language that is comprehensible to them. And I think that takes something like policy and makes it a pedagogical tool in a way that's completely different.
You nailed it. And you know what? We talk about that in our presentation, because we've been to a couple of schools in the States where the kids are directly involved because now they have buy-in. And when they have buy-in, they're more likely to comply, right? And that's what's so important.
And for the principles of informed voluntary consent, it's the informed part, and it has to be developmentally appropriate. So explaining something to a grade 4 student is going to have a totally different description than a grade 12. And we're responsible for that. We're responsible for providing that as educators to the students and the parents in terms that they can understand so that they can make a decision. And sometimes that decision is not to participate, and schools have to be willing and ready, and they're legally obligated to provide for that option to opt out.
So in closing, we're going to go from the East Coast to the West Coast. Once again, final thoughts, Doc.
Fantastic range of things that we were chatting about. The one thing that I would want to leave you guys with is, if you look at resilience, because that was one of the things we talked about at the beginning, is the one consistently evidence-backed aspect of resilience is teaching coping skills, active coping skills. And that's not something that technology always does very well, because it can be so all-consuming and numbing and escapism and distracting. So I return to that idea of cost, is that we need to spend some time learning. And I do think technology can play a part in that. But how are we teaching our kids to be bored? How are we teaching them to manage their moods? How are we teaching them to handle conflict? So technology can be part of that, but we need to make sure that if that is too consuming, there's still room for that elsewhere, because it will make a difference in their mental health and well-being overall.
That's why you're on the panel. Love it. Kat.
I think we've all discussed and we all agree that tech is a positive thing, and there's a lot of great things to get out about tech. That said, when schools are handing out either software access or hardware, whatever it is, ask questions. A lot of these schools, we have said, are launching sometimes into tech programs without understanding everything that's going on. You have every right to ask what your child is using or what they have access to, and how you can control that at home if that's something that you need to do with your child.
Awesome. Sandra.
I just think it was great discussion that we had. And, my final thoughts are just, this is part of our new norm. They're going to be coming into schools. And as teachers, we just need to continue to offer our kids in schools with community and parents opportunities that are unplugged. So, if it's in small towns, in rural spots where kids don't have access to, trampoline parks and huge wave pools on the weekend, what can you do in conjunction with some of your community members? And that has been really successful in some of our little northern tiny little towns up here. So things like movie nights, board games, dodgeball against the local RCMP and first responders on a weekend. So just getting your kids out and all of those things that they can do to just be healthy and all-round people.
I think with what you just said there, Kat is your new best friend.
Yeah, totally.
He really is. Look at her smiling. You know what I'm talking about. Julia, you're what do you think?
I think there is so much potential for good with technology. And I think the media likes to play up techno panic because it sells. But as we leave, I would just want to remind people, everybody in Canada, privacy is your right to your personal information. In BC in particular, you have the right to protect your children's and your personal information. So you have the right to know what information they're using, how they're using it, and those things. And if you don't want it on technology, if you don't want it accessible outside of Canada beyond your charter protections, then use your voice. And if they don't listen, just keep banging the drum, and there's people that can help.
Yeah, parental abdication is a big issue, right? And we parents need to get more involved in all these issues for sure. So for me, first, I want to thank the panel for participating today, and the viewers for a couple of questions that they've asked. And I hope that everybody that was watching was able to take away one digital nugget, right? I know I did. I learned a couple of really cool things from everybody on the panel. You know what? I must emphasize as well that I truly do believe that the majority of our kids are doing super uber cool things online. They truly are being really good digital citizens. A small minority aren't, but the vast majority are. And I think that we adults and parents need to start acknowledging that fact more to deal with some of that fear base that we see going out there with regards to this technology. The research shows us, however, that those parents that are engaged with their kids via parental participation, communication, and overwatch were reasonable to do so. Those kids are far less likely to get involved, right? It's all about family. It's all about communication, right? That's what it's all about, in my opinion. But also, parents, remember, you want to be a good digital role model. If you're a parent who's texting and driving, guess what your kids are going to do? If you're a parent that goes into your bedroom or into your bathroom with your cell phone, guess what your kids are going to do? If you're the type of parent when the kid is trying to have a discussion with you and you're buried into your cell phone when they're trying to have an important conversation with you, guess what they're going to do when you're trying to have an important conversation with them and they have the cell phone, right? So parenting matters. And the research shows us that they will model our behavior. Again, for those who are watching the broadcasts, you'll be able to find this on our YouTube channel. So we've recorded it. It's going to be live on our YouTube channel to go. So please spread it and share it with others. And for everybody else who's watching, we're going to have a lot more of these. I was writing down more things, more ideas. We're going to have you guys separately come in by yourselves, and we're going to have really good conversations on some of these topics, because we've built this wonderful studio now to get this out there virtually, where we can reach around the world to people, to students, to teachers, all kinds of people. So stay tuned for that. And you know what? A really big thank you to Brandon, who's working all the magic here, man. If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be doing this. And what you don't know is his partner, Candace, who's our social media manager, is in the back, and she's been monitoring and doing all kinds of stuff there as well. Like I did in my last presentation to my panel, a tip of my white hat to all of you. You guys were awesome. And I think we here in Canada, we're doing a really good job. And, you know, just look at the four of you and what it is that you're doing. So from the White Hatter studio here in Victoria, British Columbia, to all our watchers, I want to thank you for listening and participating. And I hope you got a lot out of it. And I'm looking forward to next year. So on behalf of the White Hatter and the White Hatter team in the panel, thank you very much and have a great night.